Scene: Miguel's kitchen. Miguel watched from the kitchen window into the backyard, where the rose bushes Helena had planted continued to bloom, even after 9 years. 9 years without his daughter. 9 years without his wife, who couldn't bear the loss and had left on a cold winter morning, leaving only a crumpled note on the table. "I can't pretend anymore that she'll come back." The coffee grew cold in his trembling hands, its bitter aroma mixing with the lingering scent of fresh paint from the walls he obsessively repainted, as if he could erase the memories clinging to the corners of the house. The doorbell rang 3 times, insistent. Miguel hesitated before opening the door, knowing it would be another salesperson or a nosy neighbor wanting to stir up the past. But he found a thin woman, her hair gray and her eyes deep-set, clutching a briefcase to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Torres, I'm Dr. Marcia Stone, from the Hope Foundation. I need to talk to you about your daughter." Her voice was gentle, but there was something in her eyes that made Miguel's stomach clench. He let her in, noticing how she examined every corner of the room. The portraits of Isabella still hanging on the walls, the forgotten toy on the sofa he'd never had the heart to put away. The woman sat on the edge of the armchair, as if ready to flee at any moment. "Mr. Torres, I've worked with missing children cases for 20 years. Your case has always intrigued me, because—" she hesitated, fiddling with the papers in her hands. "Because there are patterns that repeat themselves. Patterns you may not have noticed at the time." Miguel felt the air leave his lungs. What patterns? "In the last 5 years, 3 children have disappeared in neighboring towns. All were the same age as Isabella when she vanished. All were playing near the houses of solitary neighbors." She pulled photographs from the briefcase and spread them on the coffee table. And all these neighbors had something in common. They attended meetings of a very specific religious group. The photographs showed smiling children's faces, children who never came home. Miguel picked up one of the photos with trembling hands, recognizing something familiar in the girl's expression, the way she held a doll to her chest. "Do you remember your neighbor, August Miller?" Dr. Stone's question cut through the silence like a knife. How could he forget? August, the quiet man who lived in the blue house next door, who always offered Isabella candy and talked to her about cartoons. On the night the girl disappeared, he was the last to see her, saying she had returned home around 7 o'clock. The police questioned him, searched his property, but found nothing. August moved out 3 weeks later, claiming he couldn't stand the suspicious looks of the neighbors anymore. "He died 6 months ago," Dr. Stone continued. "Cancer. But before he died, he made a confession to a priest. The priest broke the confidentiality because he believed there were more lives at risk." Miguel felt the world spin around him. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, and he had to hold on to the arm of the chair to avoid fainting. What did he confess? That he participated in rituals with a group that believed in the sacrifice of innocence to achieve spiritual purification. That there was a place where— she paused, observing Miguel's pale face— where they kept sacred offerings. The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the wall clock, each second echoing like a hammer blow to Miguel's skull. He stood up abruptly, walking to the window overlooking the backyard. August's blue house had been empty for years, with for sale signs that no one ever took down. The shed in the back remained untouched, covered in ivy and neglect. "You're suggesting that she's still—" Miguel couldn't finish the sentence. "We don't know, but there's a chance, Mr. Torres. The other cases showed that the group kept the children alive for long periods as part of their rituals. If there's any possibility—" Miguel didn't wait for her to finish. He ran to the backyard, jumped the low fence separating the properties, and headed towards August's shed. Dr. Stone shouted after him, asking him to call the police first, but he had already lost 9 years of his daughter's life. He wouldn't lose another second. The shed's lock was rusty, but it gave way with a few kicks. The door creaked open, revealing a dark interior that smelled of mildew and something else, something sweet and sickening that made Miguel cover his nose with his sleeve. He turned on his phone's flashlight and swept the area. Stacked boxes, old tools, spider webs dancing in the still air. But in the back, partially hidden by a dirty blanket, there was a staircase leading down to a basement. Miguel descended the wooden steps that groaned under his weight. The smell grew stronger, mixing with a chemical odor that burned his nostrils. The flashlight illuminated a larger space than he expected, with concrete walls and a low ceiling supported by wooden beams. And then he saw. On the walls, hundreds of photographs. Children playing, laughing, running. Some he recognized from the photos Dr. Stone had shown. Others were unknown. And in the center of the back wall, enlarged and framed like an altar, was a photo of Isabella on her 7th birthday, blowing out the candles. Miguel stumbled backward, his heart pounding so hard he could hear his pulse in his ears. The flashlight trembled in his hands, creating dancing shadows that transformed the photographs into smiling specters. "Daddy?" The voice was weak, almost a whisper, but Miguel recognized it instantly. It was the voice he heard in his dreams that woke him in the middle of the night, that made him cry in the shower where no one could see. He swung the flashlight towards the sound and saw a metal door in the left corner of the basement. His hands shook so violently that he almost dropped his phone as he raced towards it. The handle was locked, but he kicked it with all his might, ignoring the pain that shot through his leg. The door. She remained huddled in the corner, watching him with a mixture of love and terror that broke his heart. "Bella, it's me. Daddy's here to get you." He tried to keep his voice calm, but the tears wouldn't stop falling. "I know, but—" She glanced behind her, into the darkness of the basement. "They said you didn't want me anymore, that I was tainted now, that I belonged to them." The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. "We knew you'd come," a calm, controlled male voice said. "August warned us before he died that you'd eventually find out." A bright light illuminated the stairs, and Michael could see 3 figures descending. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in dark clothing, all with serene expressions that were jarringly out of place. "Mr. Torres," the woman said, appearing to be the leader, "you shouldn't be here." "I came to get my daughter," Michael replied, putting himself in front of Isabella. "Your daughter?" The woman laughed, a chilling sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "She's not your daughter anymore. She's been purified, consecrated to the service of a higher cause. You can't simply take her back." Michael noticed that the 2 men were carrying things, ropes, restraints, and a syringe. "What have you done to her?" His voice was a roar. "We saved her," the woman said, "just as we saved the others. We give them purpose, a sacred mission. They are our little saints, our pure offerings." Isabella clutched Michael's shirt, whispering, "Daddy, there's a passage behind the shelf. August showed it to me once. It leads to the neighbor's backyard on the other side." Michael nodded imperceptibly. He needed to create a distraction. "You're sick!" he yelled at the 3 intruders. "You kidnapped children, kept them captive, traumatized them for life." "Traumatized?" The woman seemed genuinely surprised. "We liberated them from the sins of the world, from the corruption of society. They live in purity, in holiness." As she spoke, Michael subtly pushed the shelf Isabella had mentioned. There was indeed a narrow passage, almost a hole in the wall, that seemed to lead to a tunnel. "Isabella," he whispered, "when I say go, you run through that hole and don't stop until you're safe. Understand?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You're not taking her," one of the men said, advancing with the syringe. "She belongs to us now." "Go!" Michael yelled, shoving Isabella towards the passage. She hesitated for a second, looking back, but then disappeared into the tunnel. Michael turned to face the three, knowing he probably wouldn't walk away alive. The first man lunged at him, attempting to administer the syringe, but Michael managed to dodge and land a punch to his face. The man stumbled backward, hitting his head on a shelf. The second man was more cautious, circling Michael like a predator. The woman watched as if she were attending a show. "You don't understand," she said calmly. "We are a family, a sacred family. Your daughters are our daughters. We love them, we care for them, we protect them." "Protect?" Michael growled. "You keep them locked away in the dark." "We keep them safe, away from the violence, the corruption, the wickedness of the outside world." The woman stepped closer, and Michael could see that she genuinely believed what she was saying. "You can't offer her that. You lost her once, you'll lose her again." The words hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. Part of him knew she was right. He had failed as a father. He had lost Isabella. He had lost Helen. But another part of him, the part that had spent 9 years blaming himself, hating himself, destroying himself, had finally found purpose again. "Maybe I'm not the perfect father," he said, advancing towards the woman. "Maybe I failed before, but she's my daughter, and I'm going to protect her from you." The second man took advantage of the distraction to attack from behind, but Michael heard his footsteps and turned in time. They wrestled, rolling across the basement floor, kicking photographs off the walls. Michael managed to grab an old tool, a rusty pipe wrench, and used it to defend himself. The man fell, groaning. Michael stood up, breathless, and saw that the woman had vanished. She had probably gone after Isabella. He ran to the passage, squeezing through the narrow hole. The tunnel was tight, barely wide enough for his shoulders, and the smell of damp earth and mildew was suffocating. But he pressed on, crawling in the dark, guided only by the hope of finding his daughter. The tunnel ended in an opening covered by rotten planks. Michael broke them with kicks and emerged into an unfamiliar backyard. It was night, and the full moon illuminated the abandoned garden where he found himself. He heard voices coming from the street, Isabella screaming for help, and other voices trying to calm her down. "Daddy!" Isabella ran to him, throwing herself into his arms again. "Mr. Torres," one of the officers said, "we're surrounding the property. How many people were in the basement?" "3. 2 men and a woman. I think I hurt the men, but the woman escaped." Michael hugged Isabella tighter. "They said there are other children, somewhere in the mountains." The officer nodded, saying something into his radio. Sirens approached, and Michael could see flashing lights at the end of the street. "Daddy!" Isabella ran to him, throwing herself into his arms again. "Mr. Torres," one of the officers said, "we're surrounding the property. How many people were in the basement?" 3. 2 men and a woman. I think I hurt the men, but the woman escaped." Michael hugged Isabella tighter. "They said there are other children, somewhere in the mountains." The officer nodded, saying something into his radio. Sirens approached, and Michael could see flashing lights at the end of the street. "Daddy," Isabella whispered, "I want to go home." Michael looked at her, seeing not the 7-year-old child he had lost, but the courageous teenager who had survived the unthinkable. "We will, Princess. We're going home." But as he looked at the house where he had lived with Helen and Isabella, where he had spent 9 years mourning and blaming himself, he knew it wasn't home anymore. Home was where they were together, wherever that might be. "Actually," he said, "how about we look for a new place, a place that's ours?" Isabella smiled for the first time since he had found her.